My name is Itay Keren, and I am a game designer developer from North Chatham. That's new for me. This is Teaching by Design, tips for effective and playful tutorials. So I've released a game called Mushroom 11 7 years ago, available on pretty much anything with a pointer. It has very simple controls, basically just move the finger, the pointer to erase. But that enables a lot of different mechanics that proved really difficult to explain to the players. And one of the things that was very obvious in our game as we started testing it is that the tutorial needed a lot of work to try to teach the players all the different things that you could do with it. Our experience, we had 4 years of trial and error before we released the game. We started with more than 20% people who left the game before they reached the end of the first level, which went down pretty much to 0. We were able to do so mostly with playful teaching, not with pretty much no pop-ups and no hand-holding, a little bit hand-holding. And the realization that every player can be taught virtually anything. There are really no excuses. You are the designer. If the player cannot understand what to do, this is your fault as a designer. This is not a harsh thing to do. I'm not trying to be harsh. This is something that I realized that I didn't do the best design in the beginning, or I didn't put the focus on the design of the tutorial, and I try to come up with some tips how to improve it. So the first thing is figure out what it is that you're trying to teach. You need to identify the individual knowledge gaps and list everything. So you need to remember the expert bias. At the point where we show the game to testers or to other players, we have played it thousands of times, and things that are very obvious to us will not be clear to other people. For example, this is how the image shows how Mushroom 11 started, one of the first versions of the tutorial. Players wouldn't even know what the protagonist is. They did not know which way to go. They did not understand the controls. Every single thing was unclear to them. So we need to understand their preconceived notions, and some of them is how they see other games. For example, if they know that they're playing a platformer, that they, for example, might expect for this to go left to right. So one of my favorite images of all time is that the first thing that you see in Super Mario Brothers, when we're talking about identifying the knowledge gaps. Look what this game did before you even started playing. You already understand that you're a person because this is literally the only object on the screen. You are standing on a very firm, clear ground, so gravity is probably in effect. The moving direction is marked with a very clear head direction and the negative space to your right. And this is something that I love personally, the idea of the background separation. Just imagine that if the hill was to the right of Mario, you might expect it to be an obstacle. But instead, it's behind you, so you already have this implicit understanding of what it is that you can interact with. So let's think about our brain for a second, how it evolved through the years. We tend to think about ourselves as this amazing, logical, fully knowing, all-knowing machine. But that takes time and energy and calories when sometimes we don't have that time. We need to use our fight and flight mechanism in order to survive. So we kind of devised these two types of brain mechanisms, these two systems. One is the quick, intuitive response, the fight or flight one. The other one is the slow logical that you kind of kicks in when you need to learn new things or to get deep understanding of things. And there's virtually no conscious way to put any one of them into action. So with that in mind, we need to give space and teach one thing at a time. If you have too much cognitive load, it will make the players revert back to their instincts, to that first quick system, where they just try to run away and not learning anything and not doing very well. In this puzzle, let me just, we need to also understand that the lag and spacing effect says that the more space and time given when you learn, the better the retention is. So we need to present these new concepts one at a time and let the players improve and retain the information better. So in this case, I was trying to teach players about this very weird concept that was key to an understanding of Mushroom 11, that you don't grow back mid-air. And I made this element with a lot of elevators, so there's a lot of air time. But players used to just fall between the cracks all the time. And when it feels like it's very risky, learning cannot really happen. So I put those elevators really close to each other in a way that there's always a piece of ground that will trigger the growth. And that way, players implicitly understand the growth, but also do this in relatively risk-free environment. Self-motivated and self-generated skill gain. Generation effect says that learning is better remembered when it's self-generated, when you actually produce this information by yourself, rather than being told or dictated. So we know about the intrinsic reward is the kind of the personal sense of accomplishment and progress that involves the dopamine, increases the motivation, helps you learn, helps you retain, and makes you want to do the same thing over and over again. Extrinsic reward is kind of like the external acknowledgement. It does not actually, it might help change the motivation in the long term, but it does not actually affect learning. I love this puzzle from level 1 of Super Mario Brothers as well. You usually fall into this trap when you don't understand high jump. And there's nothing in the original game that tells you that you need to long press the jump button. You can stay there forever, and nothing will ever tell you to press anything. You will eventually press on one of the two available buttons and figure this out. And once you do, you have gained this skill, and you can continue playing better for the next challenge. So, learn by play. The self-acquired skills are more effective and they last longer. Instead of being told what to do, you are doing the thing because we made a puzzle for you to accomplish that. So let players develop those skills by completing specific challenges that we identify, we create for those skills. So for this skill in Mushroom 11, again, the first part of level 1, I needed to teach them how to split, which is an incredibly important part. So after some debate, I figured out that I need to make a very simple, risk-free puzzle that you can only accomplish by splitting. In fact, you might even do the splitting by mistake, but as soon as you do, there is a very clear cause and effect. You press the button, you made it the gap. You press the button, the door opens, I got it. The learning happens. And I also always think that using pop-ups is cheating, of course, terms apply. The other part, that was active learning by playing, but there's also the passive play, the observation. And this is a trick that we can pull off, and other games do it very well, either by mistake or by chance. Players must observe the effect, just like we saw with the splitting. You split, you open the door. If you observe the effect, even if it's done passively, players would retroactively attribute this to their own actions using some sort of hindsight bias. For example, the idea of stomping mushrooms in Super Mario Brothers, also, I remember that the first time that I did that, that was by mistake because there was a box that I bumped my head onto and dropped on top of a mushroom. I didn't actually mean to stomp on it because I didn't know if this is an interactable object, you know? But once you do that, you are like, oh yeah, clearly this is what I meant to do. I saw the response. I saw what happened. Now I know how to kill enemies. So once we see that cause and effect, the new skill is already acquired, whether or not it was active. So place the players in a situation where the only observed outcome demonstrates a new skill that you're trying to teach them. In Mushroom 11, the idea of a rigid, massive skeleton body was very hard to explain. People thought that it was very squishy. I actually tried to make this all about sculpting and everything, that you're actually heavy. So there's really no challenge here. You just go through the cage, and once you fill up the cage, you have enough mass in it to break it. Once you see that you did, you have a much better understanding of how the skeleton works and the fact that you have mass. Most importantly, when you teach players new skills, make sure that everything is safe. Like they provide them a safe place to experiment, and of course, failure should be also feel safe. So people adjust their behavior according to the perceived level of risk. It's a little bit related to what we saw with the cognitive load before. Again, it's a perceived level of risk. This is how right now I teach players how to move forward, which is an incredibly difficult task. This is not necessarily how I teach them, it's more like how I make sure that they understood it. But that's not how it started. Because presenting the new information in a stressful circumstances inhibits your ability to perform and kind of pushes you back to that quick, intuitive fight or flight mechanism. This is how I decided to start teaching the players how to move forward. I presented this building that falls into lava. Okay, it's very much similar to that backward-going conveyor belt. It just kind of like gives you 15 seconds to finish that path. But it's a building that's falling into lava, and players are like, "Oh my God, I need to do this real quick." And instead of like meticulously, moving the protagonist forward, they were just trying to erase it. They couldn't perform. Skill was not gained. I tried something a little different. I came up with the backward moving conveyor belt, but I put some spikes just so it feels like, oh, you need to go that way. And players saw this, and spikes in this game have really no meaning. It's just like an eraser. It doesn't change. Like you still keep on growing. But because you have played a million games with spikes are bad, then players are like, oh my God, I cannot touch the spikes. Same effect exactly. So this is what I end up with. You have a pretty long conveyor belt, no stress. If you've reached the end of the conveyor belt, you already know how to move. And in some cases, you have to teach players about deadly things, right? So if risk is inevitable when teaching a new skill, minimize the pain and the friction. So in this case, I'm teaching about this cancerous acid. You are very likely going to die when you encounter this thing. So I just put it right by the save point. There's really no need for what I call the lingering defeat of trying to failing and then going 3 minutes to go back to where you left. That it makes no sense when you're learning. You should not be stressed when you learn. Okay, clear goals. It's very, so this tutorial, it's very important that you have clear goals. You need to know where you're going. So set a clear goal or direction and avoid false patterns. There's a thing called what you see is all there is. Players stop looking for a better solution because they already have a preconceived notion of what you need to do. In this case, I need to go up that tunnel on the left-hand side to drop onto that seesaw. But there's no visual cue, so players just missed it. All I needed to do is have some sort of breadcrumbs, something that you can follow through. Once you're up, there's really nothing else you can do. It's very clear what needs to happen. Worst case, you'll do it a couple of times, and then you can move on. Remove any irrelevant or misleading cues. That's also very, very important. Keep it very clean, and everything that does not contribute to the goal should go. This is one of the favorite puzzles in level 1. But at some point, we did some visual enhancement with the artist, and all of a sudden, 50% of the players couldn't finish this puzzle. And we're trying to figure this out and realized that he added a bunch of ladders on the left-hand side of this challenge. And players just know that ladders are kind of a call to action. You need to go there and try to climb them in some form, just because they have some notions of other games. So once they are like, oh, you know, I didn't get far enough, and once they have a perceived solution, it may be too late with their functional fixedness. Excuse me. You may know this problem. It's called the bat and the ball. The bat and ball cost $1.10. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. Most people, when they see this, they kind of immediately like, oh, I see two numbers. Let's subtract. I know the answer. But that's actually the wrong answer for most. Most people get it wrong, which is amazing, because they use the path of least resistance to get any answer or any solution. They use the intuition, system 1. So we need to engage the system 2, the slow analytical thinking, when we want to teach them new things. Sometimes we have to artificially make them stop and think. By changing the color of the text, people who see this problem have harder time to read, but that engages their slow thinking. And by changing the color of the text here, it changed, I believe, from 70% failure to 30% failure for a group of students. I can't remember. So the presentation of your information can completely alter the user approach. So make the players stop and think to engage that slow thinking. To teach a new skill, you may need to force them to stop, observe, and think. This is a puzzle where we needed to teach the players to sculpt. What they would do, because they're used to it, they would just swipe through and then fall into lava, because there's no momentum in this game. We need to let them play, understand their wrong assumption, and then challenge them with solutions in the tutorial. So we changed the visual, changed the path, so it doesn't seem like it's a continuation. It got a little better, but it still didn't fix it. And we need to remember the functional fixedness. Re-evaluating a challenge after you have a solution in your mind is very hard. Excuse me. So this is how we solved it. And just there's no visual path between those tunnels. And players are like, oh my God, I'm just going to fall into lava. And they stop, they think, they come up with a solution, and they learn how to sculpt. You can also add playful struggles in order to make players observe new things that you want to teach them. In this case, the idea that every cell can grow. I made the camera always focus on whatever piece that was left behind. And players would just try to go forward until they realize that there are pieces left behind. Once they clear them, they can go forward, but at that point, they've already learned a very important lesson. Make sure that those artificial struggles are risk-free and stress-free for the reasons we discussed before. And otherwise, the retention is going to be gone. Speaking of retention, repeat for retention and prime before ramping up. This is an Ebbinghaus diagram. It's a forgetting curve. That's the forgetting curve. It takes 3 days for new information to be forgotten. If you review the information, it will refresh the information, of course, but not only that, it will also extend how long you can retain this information. The more times you revisit information, the better and longer it will remain. So challenge the players again with similar puzzles to help with long-term retention. Priming. When you want to increase the difficulty of a puzzle, start with a puzzle of a lower difficulty of the same type. For example, in level 2, I wanted to make another sculpting puzzle, a little harder. I would lose a lot of players here. So, and I still wanted to increase their skill of sculpting. What I ended up doing is made another very simple sculpting puzzle just before that. Okay, so now I'm in the mindset, the player's in the mindset of sculpting, I can increase the difficulty. If you want to create a multi-skill challenge that involves multiple skills, for example, sliding and jumping together, you should consider putting a just slide challenge followed by just jump challenge and then combine them together. Handhold as last resort. So, of course, in some cases, basic controls must be pointed out. Players cannot understand something; they don't understand how to interact. Sometimes you have to describe it with text or pop-up. So minimize the text to avoid information overload. You know, the usual numbers are 2 lines up to 8 words per line. You know, even in a game with a lot of make the player go through the path themselves, they still need to get some information, for example, about controls. All right, I'm going to move a little forward, a little faster. Make sure, use the context effect. Information better learned when you keep it within the confines of the game. Pop up with a video of what you need to do is worse than actually making you, taking the controls from you and letting you see what happens. This is what I did for Mushroom 11. I needed to teach players what to do. I tried to do a lot of different elements. I tried to use standard icons like, oh, put the finger here, like lines that goes back and forth. I tried to change the color, maybe yellow is scary. I tried arrows, I tried circles. I swear, all these were in the game at some point. Eventually, I just handheld. Like I took over the controls and added a very short text. Use eraser to move, mostly just to put in the information that you are, in fact, an eraser. All right, last thing, test your tutorial. Test in events. The crowd is, of course, you always test with your friends and whatnot, but testing events, crowd is large, diverse in terms of capabilities, and it has a low frustration threshold. They will go away if they don't enjoy it. That's the information that you need. Unlike your friends who are going to be polite or customers who bought it, so they need to kind of rationalize why they like the game. Do not speak. Let the game do the teaching. This is super important. If you feel like you want to tell them, oh, you need to do this, put this in the game. Write it down, put this in the game, and put it in the tutorial. Mark everything that the player does wrong or something that you feel like you want to tell them. This is an invest tip for the unknown developer. Don't tell them that you're a developer. You get a great unfiltered information. I did a lot of A/B testing. 2 stations, running slightly different challenges, and sometimes even 2 scenes that I can switch with a button. If players have a hard time, I switch it. Oh, that works better. I'm going to stay with this one. And of course, beta and post-release, send stats. You don't need to send too much stuff, but how long is spent per each of the challenges? And if you see that some of the challenges, they linger too long, or God forbid, they don't proceed to the next one, you know where you need to fix. You straighten that path and reduce what I call the rage quit. percentage to make sure that it's kind of like slowly ramping down. That's it. That's all I have. Thank you very much. Any questions?
I was just wondering, when you're doing testing for your game, how you traditionally go about collecting data. Like, I know you mentioned taking notes of like reactives, but like, do you do like a forum, or like, what's your, I guess?
Yeah, I still have my old sketchbook with pages of like, EGX or packs, and the amount of information is huge. Of course, it's really hard to kind of like sift through and understand what are the action items. But one of the most difficult things to do is to like get out of your head. Like, no, stop blaming the player. Me messed up. I did not, like, if the player does not do a good job in controlling, it means that the game is too hard, the controls are not working. These are the things that, like, stop rationalizing why they do a bad job and start thinking of like, okay, how can I fix that for them? But yeah, it's a lot of information. By the way, all these, I used Google Analytics very, very early. So a lot of this information for the rage quits and stuff, I had back when it was way, way pre-beta. So a lot of this information was like information that I got like with notes, and then I could just go to the Google Analytics page and see like, oh, you know what? Challenge 7, which is, I don't know, the sculpting challenge, has people play for 5 minutes on average. Okay, that's terrible, considering that the previous one is 30 seconds. So look at those peaks and flatten them between events.
Thank you.
With more complicated games, sometimes it's simply not possible to do what it seems to me that, for example, like a grand strategy game, it's not entirely possible to walk the player through everything, because like you have a menu with like 50 entries and they're all super important. Sometimes you simply have to explain something. What would you do in that situation? Like, give them a lab book sort of to play around with?
Yeah, this is actually a great example. I think, of course, in many cases you have to put text on the screen. This is particularly a very low text game, okay? But when you do, so if you want to explain one thing, sure, tell the player what it is, but do not tell them what the other things are if you don't have to. So you create this kind of like a kind of preview level where there's only one thing that you need to do in this level. Remember Portal, right? Remember how Portal begins. It is incredibly difficult mechanic to explain, and they did a really great job by first, imagine this, first if I recall, I think they only used one of the colors. So think about, someone said, you know what, we don't have to use both colors to begin with. And it's like, yeah, I guess you're right, we do not. And this is a way to explain part without putting a lot of cognitive load on you.
You don't even have a portal gun to start with. They just make all the
Oh,
portals.
you're right, exactly. That's exactly right. So the more thing, and sometimes you need to get out of your head, it's like, okay, what do I need to teach them? Oh, right, I need to teach them how to walk before I even shoot the gun. Let's teach them that first. And those are the things that we, after we play thousands of hours, we forget. We forget because it's intuitive to us, because we're the best at our game, but not everyone is,
Yeah, so, for example, in a game like Civilization, if you want to teach them how to declare war, you don't ask them to, hey, there's a guy over here, win a war against him. You say, declare war, and then we'll teleport you to a war you're winning so you can figure out how to end it.
Right.
I see, that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. Just the atomic elements of teaching, figure them out. And that's like the biggest part of understanding how to create a tutorial.
All right, thanks.
Thank you very much, everyone. Oh.